So for today's class, we're going to continue immigration. I feel like me a step in another mask here. Sorry, me have to take it off. All right. The so for today's class, we're going to continue to look at immigration. Last, well, on Monday, we looked at Monday and Tuesday, we look at reasons for immigration. And so we just want to look at the distributions of immigrants right across the Caribbean. So somebody volunteer for me, please. Look at the British territories. Let us look at, in fact, let us look at the different immigrants that came. So the different immigrants came from where?
Europe, Africa, China, East India.
What is the M word, sir?
Madeira.
A country name, Madeira.
Africa, China, and India, right? So we had new immigrants coming from these places, right? Europe, in particular, the places in Europe that the immigrants came from are places like Germany. And as we would have mentioned before, that we have a German settlement in Jamaica. I think it is Seaford Town. And so that is one example. You have the Portuguese that also came, very, very poor. And then you had Africa. From Africa, you have the free Africans that came, and they came from, they didn't come to the Caribbean as enslaved people, but as freed people. So you call them freed Africans. They came from Sierra Leone, right? So these are the areas that they arrived from. Then we have the Chinese and the Indians. Now, if we look at the British West Indies, for the British West Indies, we had most of the immigrants that came from India, and this was 416,000 immigrants. That's the number. And we had 17,430 Chinese, 36,500 Africans, Madeiran, 36,100, and the Europeans, 502. Now, if we look at the French West Indies, also had a large number of immigrants from India at 88,000, the Chinese 1,500, and 17,000 free Africans. And if we look at the Dutch West Indies, the majority of immigrants came also from India. So India supplied the Caribbean with a lot of immigrants after slavery ended. Now, if we look at the immigrants per territory, and we're looking directly at East Indians in the territory of the British West Indies, I'm not recording. Yes, I'm recording. Thanks much, Miller.
Oh, never mind. Sir, that's not what I meant. But,
What, you're hearing me?
yes, sir, but like you were just talking, sir, it sounded like it was like a video you were playing or something.
No, man, it's record. I'm recording. Hope you're hearing me. If you're not hearing, let me know. Because I'm at school. I'm not at home with my good internet. All right, ladies. So let us look at the distribution of Indians in the British Caribbean. So in Trinidad had 134,000 Indians. British Guyana, 239,000, and Jamaica, 33,000. All the other territories like Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, St. Kitts, they all received less than 3,000 immigrants per the population, right? In terms of the East Indian. Now, this is a very, very popular question in the exam, especially the paper one. where they ask which of these territories had the most Indians, and they might put 1 Trinidad, 2 Grenada, 3 British Guyana, 4 Jamaica, something to that effect. So always remember that the 3 territories that had the most immigrants, British Caribbean territories, Trinidad, British Guyana, which is Guyana today, and Jamaica. All right, those are the 3 territories. Now, another important uh, information that you need to know is that Barbados and Dominica did not import immigrants, right? So they had no immigrants at all in Barbados and Dominica. And the reason for this is because after slavery ended, they would have implemented a contract system there. And we would have gone through the contract system already. And also the system of metayage. Somebody can remind me what the system of metayage was? Come, ladies, time is against us. What was the system of metayage? Hello?
Sir, was it basically what we were talking about when we were discussing peasantry, as in when the owner of land would allow like an extensive to work on the land and their pay our wages would basically be a portion of what was cultivated?
Very good. That's correct. That is correct, Nelson. That is the system of metayage. All right. And so, in fact, these territories like Barbados and Dominica had available laborers. So they really had no need to import laborers. But in the case of Trinidad, British Guiana, Jamaica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and St. Kitts, for those territories, most of the ex-enslaved people, once slavery finished, they left the plantation. And so that's one of the issues. Now, let us look at some of the places that the immigrants came from, the Indians. I know we're looking at the Indian immigrants. The, so places in India that they came from include Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and Bihar, right? So these are the different places. Please, ladies, look at these places because they usually ask you this in the paper. 1. So note the different places that the immigrants in India, where the immigrants came from. This is a paper 1 question. All right. Now, for the paper that was released from CXC recently, they are going to focus on Chinese immigrants. And so if we look at the numbers of Chinese immigrants in the Caribbean, the British Caribbean received 17,430, the French 1,500, and the Dutch 2,502. So we know for sure, compared to the East Indians, that the Caribbean had less Chinese coming in to work on plantations. Now, the question that I know CXC will ask is why were the Chinese immigrants few in numbers, or why they had just a small number of Chinese immigrants? That is a question that is coming. That is the question you're going to get in the exam. One of the questions. That is one of the questions you're going to get. So please zero in on that. And so in answering this question, and remember you have to do the peel approach. So I would encourage you to go and practice this question, try and peel this question into 3 or 4 paragraphs. So what is it? Why they had a few immigrants in the Chinese immigrants compared to the Indians? One was that the Chinese immigrants were very expensive. The cost for a Chinese immigrant was 25 pounds. So cost is something that the planter is going to to take into consideration, while the East Indians was 15 pounds. So if you look at 25 to 15 pounds, why you think the planters going to choose the East Indian over the Chinese? We know expenses one, but what are they trying to reduce?
The
Sir,
amount that they pay for
Yeah,
the amount that they pay for the work that they're going to do.
yes. They what we call that? What is the nice term that we use for that?
cheapness.
Repeat, Bartley?
Cheap. Sir, the cheapness.
No. We know that they want cheap labor, but what is the nice term that they use? It starts with W. They want to reduce something.
Wages.
Wages.
Very good. So they want to reduce the wage bill. So they don't want their wage bill on the plantation to be very expensive. All right. Um, and so we can look into the cost in terms of the Chinese versus the Indian. The next is the Chinese government had a lot of restriction. So if you're going to peel a question like this, you could say that another reason why the Caribbean imported few Chinese immigrants was the restriction placed by the Chinese government. So the Chinese government, while the Indian government just said all the Indians, especially those from the lower classes there, you can just go to the Caribbean. Go to the Caribbean, no problem. But in China, and even though we can know that this, we can see Chinese pride. Chinese are very proud people. So they, when we look at the restriction, they are going to place a lot of restriction the on people who want to travel to the Caribbean to work. So one is that they're going to limit the numbers. They're going to have a quota. All right. So there's going to be a quota to restrict the numbers. Now, ladies, if you look, this is the main point, and these are the supporting details. So one, they're going to limit the number by putting on a quota system. Two, they are not going to allow the females to travel to the Caribbean. The process is that the process to apply for immigrants, Chinese immigrants, is going to be long and tedious. Why do you think they want the process to be long and tedious?
So that they're like, oh, this process is taking too long. So let's just go to some other countries and get some other people.
Very good, yes. It to frustrate the entire immigrant process, right? So to bring frustration, because if we realize that in India, the process is smooth in getting workers, but in China, the process is long and tedious and you have to wait months, then obviously they are going to decide that they are going to use India instead of China, because right now the Caribbean is in serious problem. We have to think about it in that way, that the Caribbean at this time, the sugar industry basically mash up. If you look at the sugar industry also, the enslaved people live in the plantation and they are in debt. So you need workers as soon as possible. You can't wait this long time. Go ahead for me, Lawrence.
Sir, you could say that they were trying to like discourage them from going.
Yes, the Chinese government, that's what they were doing, discourage. Therefore, they wanted to discourage the Chinese nationals from coming to the Caribbean. That is the reason why. Go ahead for me, Corey.
Sir, this is unrelated, sir. Carol told me to tell you that her Wi-Fi is gone.
Repeat.
Carol told me to tell you that her Wi-Fi is gone.
All right. Um, Another reason is, which is linked to restriction, obviously with the discouragement, is that um, Chinese pride. Right now, well, at this time in China, uh, the the Chinese government was basically trying to rebuild or to develop their their country. They had a lot of issues going on in China. At this time, you had a lot of dictatorship, a lot of famine, a lot of poverty in China. China at this time, in 1830, after 1838, China was not like a developed country like what we have China today, or how we perceive China today. And so, although the Chinese government at this time were not as developed, they had some form of pride in themselves, national pride, and they felt that hard work should, Chinese nationals should devote all their time to rebuilding China or build China and not other countries. And so that was also another reason for few immigrants. Now let us also look at another reason, is the discussion here about business versus agriculture. I don't agree with it. That is my personal view, but that is what I've seen in the textbook, because I've seen a lot of videos on China, and I realized that China is also an agricultural society. But according to the textbook, they said that another reason why they had few Chinese immigrants was because they had Chinese preferred business. So they prefer to wholesale or prefer to involve in commercial activities than agricultural activities. They didn't want to work on in the cane field or on the coffee plantation. All right. Another reason why they had a few number of Chinese was that China was not part of the British Empire. India was a part of the British Empire, so it was easier for the British India and British West Indies to sign a a labor agreement to get immigrants, but China was not. All right, moving on. Any comments, any question, ladies?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Ladies, you sure you understand why they had few Chinese immigrants?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, good.
Sir.
And go ahead for me, Ashley.
Sir, for the for them not the point on them not being a part of the British Empire. So could you tie that to the government restrictions, or would you just write
You
it
could.
independently?
Yeah, man, you could. You could tie that. You could tie it to that point.
Okay, sir.
And so far from this, the reasons why they had few, from here we can have at least, let us see how much points we can develop. We can develop 1, 2, 3. We could develop 3 solid points from this section. Correct?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yes, sir.
Good, good, good. All right, now, ladies. Now, let us look at the problems the immigrants face, right? And trust me, the immigrants had a lot of problems. In fact, the British governor in Guyana, He was the first person to call Indian indentureship a new system of slavery. So the governor of British Guyana called indentureship a new system of slavery. And also an author by the name of Hugh Tinker, he wrote a book about indentureship, Indian indentureship, and he also called it a new system of slavery. So when we look at it, so we look at new system of slavery problems. What are some of the problems they're gonna face? Somebody read for me, please.
Overcrowded wooden huts, mud dirt floor, inadequate sanitation, water problem, lack of privacy, poor ventilation.
All right, good. Wait, Austin. So if you're going to the exam and they ask you, what are some of the problems or discuss the problems that the Chinese face in the Caribbean, right? We know the question is going to come about Chinese. So what were some of the problems the Chinese face? Your first point is that you're going to say that one of the challenge or one of the problems that the Chinese face was poor living condition. That is your point. Poor living condition. Now you need to support your point about poor living condition, because you cannot go into the exam and just write that the Chinese face poor living condition, or some of you might go into the exam and say that they had water problem. You cannot develop a point on the water problem. So what you need to do is that you discuss the themes or discuss the problems under different themes. And one of such is poor living condition. And so under poor living condition, you're going to talk about that the overcrowded wooden huts. Remember, it's the same barracks that the enslaved people lived in that they're going to put the immigrants in to live.
Sir.
And these barracks didn't have windows. Some of them just have one door.
Sir.
Go ahead for me.
Sir, could I say, like, due to the increase in or due to the significant amount of immigrants that were that came from any other country than like India or China, there was overcrowding in the wooden huts that they resided, and then you develop it and then you say
yes,
due to the overcrowding there was inadequate sanitation because there weren't enough sanitation facilities and those stuff.
And then you could describe the wooden huts, that the wooden huts had dirt floors. And if they are dirt floors, then that means that you're going to have problems, a lot of diseases. But we don't want to jump into that. We just need to describe the poor living condition. And so based on how you answer the question, you get your full marks for that. You get the full marks. Let us read what Beverly Steele, how she described the Indians living in Grenada. Somebody read that for me, please.
Indians, okay. Indians were poorly housed. Each one room house measured 12 feet by 9 feet and was occupied by 2 persons. They defecated near their living quarters. No other provisions having been made. They washed their sores in a pond from which they also drew drinking water, thus causing infectious diseases to spread rapidly. Beverly Steele, page 191.
So ladies, this description by Beverly Steele, right, about how the Indians lived in Grenada, this was not only a typical example from Grenada. It was right up, or a specific example from Grenada. It was right across the Caribbean. The Indians were housing, the rooms were usually one room, 12 feet by 9, right? They defecate near their living quarters. The same place that they wash they drink water from, that's where they're going to bathe. And so that is going to cause a lot of infectious diseases. And so if we look at the problems here, so one, we look at poor living conditions, and you could even, if you want to show the examiner that you are bright, you could discuss Beverly Hills. All right. Another problem was poor health conditions, right? So they had very poor health conditions. Poor ventilation because the houses were small. So you're going to have a lot of tuberculosis, which is disease that affects the lungs. You have trigger, cholera, hookworm, malaria, which is a mosquito-borne disease, high mortality. So there's a lot of immigrants that are going to die. And so in 1863, in one hospital alone, you had 45 Indians living in that, well, admitted to that hospital compared to 7 Africans. So the Indians are suffering more from the poor health conditions than the Africans in Grenada at this time. And it is the same thing for Jamaica, same thing for British Guiana, same thing for Trinidad. All right, good. Next, let us look at poor working condition. It's similar to slavery. The Chinese and the Indians, in order for them to leave the plantation, they, just like slavery, you must have a pass or a ticket to leave the plantation. They came to the Caribbean hoping how much money that they signed to, what was their salary on the contract? How much a day?
The one
1
shilling.
shilling.
1 shilling, 1 shilling per day. But right now, they don't want to pay them the 1 shilling. In fact, they want to pay them 3 shilling for the week. And there are times when they don't pay them at all. So they work for 2-3 weeks, and the immigrants, they don't receive no money. It still happens today, you know, ladies. You have a lot of people that work, and when they work, they don't get any money. Still happens. Poor working conditions. And then on the plantation, if a machine should damage any of the workers, they usually leave them just like that. Problems. So these are some of the challenges. So if you're going to the exam and you see the word problem or challenges, same thing they ask, you know. All right. Let us look at another problem, poor nutrition. Poor nutrition was another problem. And why we're going to have problem with poor nutrition is that most of the Indians and the Chinese, especially the Indians, they are coming from India, and they are Muslims and Hindus. So Hindu, they don't eat beef, and Muslims don't eat pork. Most of the Hindus are vegetarian. Same thing with the Muslims. The Chinese are coming also. They are not going to give them sufficient food. And they want to give the Hindu salt beef. Why do you think that salt beef is going to be a serious problem for the Hindu?
Because it's going against their culture, their religion.
Don't they believe in reincarnation through the cow?
Mm-hmm.
That's big disrespect.
Yes. So that's what they're gonna do with the Hindu. They're gonna give them. Remember, for us in as black people, uh, our ancestors on the plantation, they give them a lot of salt fish. So that's why we love salt fish today. So because the amount of salt fish they give away on the plantation. With the saltfish and baked bean, saltfish and
Ackee
ackee and
saltfish.
saltfish. What
My
else
my
we do?
cook saltfish and okra. Tastes nice.
Saltfish and okra, saltfish and everything, right?
So saltfish by itself.
Saltfish bites. That is true. And so they are not going to, and the only time they give us like salt beef and salt pork during slavery was like during the Christmas period. But right now, they are giving the Hindus salt beef and they're giving the Muslims salt pork. And they were vegetarians to eat. Some of them went on hunger strike. They refused to eat. Some of them died from hunger. Same thing with the Chinese. I don't want to be. All right, I'm not going to make the comment about the Chinese. All right, so that is poor nutrition. Another problem that you're going to face is cultural problems. You're coming from India. India had several different languages, a lot of different languages from India. Same thing with the Chinese coming with their language, and they're bringing them into a territory or the different territories that mostly are English speaking, and not only English speaking, but Patois, Creole, Jamaica has their Creole, Trinidad, the same thing. Barbados never had any immigrants. Grenada had their Creole, British Guiana. So it's not only English language that the immigrants are uh, coming to face as a language barrier, but also the different Creoles that were created on the plantation, cultural barrier. And they are coming as Hindu and Muslim and some Buddhism for the Chinese. And so they are going to force them to adopt Christianity. They are coming to the Caribbean, they do have no form of worship, no place of worship, I should say. So that's a problem. When we can command all the Christians gone off to church, you as the Hindu or the Muslim or you worship Buddha, you have no place to worship. That's a cultural problem you're going to face. And then another problem that is very important was the clash over females. So the Indians and the Chinese had a lot of war over the females with the black men. So that was also another problem. And then one historian note, I think it is Beverly Steele, she said that the low proportion of women to men remained a feature throughout indentureship. So most of the immigrants coming from India, they are males. Most of the Chinese coming, in fact, 90% of the Chinese coming from China, they are males. And so when they reach on the plantation to work, there's going to be a problem because they are going to clash over the females that are there. And that was a lot of problem that would have caused back in the day. All right, so you have the clash over females, a lot of fight happened. Go ahead for me, Lawrence.
Sir, could you put that under sociocultural?
Yes, you could. You could put it on a sociocultural. And then remember that the Indians and the Chinese come in with their own celebrations, festivals. So the Chinese going to have their Chinese New Year. The Indians going to have Diwali, Pagwa, right? The Muslims going to have their holidays. And so the Christians, both African Christians and the European Christians, are going to criticize them for celebrating their holidays. They're going to say that they are worshiping the devil, right? And so that was also a serious problem on the plantation or in the society overall. All right, ladies. Another problem that you're going to face here is that the females, especially the Indian and the Chinese females, they are going to face a lot of sexual abuse. Somebody read what the historian here said, Beverly Steele. Read it
Women
for me.
are often sexually abused by the planters and their overseers. The gross imbalance in numbers between men and women recruited for indentureship and the paucity of women encouraged immorality among workers. Beverly Steele, page 185.
All right, good. So we know for sure that from what the historian is saying here, they are saying that they were abused. And also the type of punishment, same way how they try to punish blacks during slavery, they are going to implement some of those same punishment on the Indians and the Chinese. All right. And that's the reason why historians consider indentureship as a new system of slavery. That's why they consider it as a new system of slavery. So what are they going to do? What the Indians are going to do, what the Chinese are going to do to respond to all of this? One, Chinese and the Indians, most of them are going to return home. They're going to return back to Asia. They're going to complain once they reach back to China and to India. They're going to complain to their officials there and say, listen, don't send any more Chinese back to the Caribbean because things not looking good down there. Same thing for the Indians, they don't do the same. And so the Chinese government and the Indian government, what they're going to do is to abolish the system indentureship that work for it. They're going to abolish it. Chinese are also going to use a lot of bush doctors to cure their different diseases. Um, the Chinese are also going to segregate themselves from the society. The East Indian are going to resist conversion, especially in Trinidad and British Guyana. So they're not going to convert to Christianity. They're going to resist it, sometimes violently. They are going to establish their own Hindu temples and their mosques, and they're going to establish their own schools. Another thing that they're going to do is that they're going to riot. Don't think that the Indians and the Chinese just going to sit down and say, all right, planter, do whatever you want to do with me. No. So you have the Angel Gabriel riot in Guyana in 1854. You had over 18 Indian strikes in Jamaica between 1847 and 1921. In Trinidad had 52 strikes. They're going to ask for their wages to increase, right? And that the workload reduce. So these are the different ways in which they are going to respond. But how the colonial authority is going to respond to this, to the complaints by the Indians and the Chinese? One, they're going to establish a medical system. And on the medical system that's going to be implemented, each estate must establish a hospital and must have a nurse, and they're going to inspect in terms of medical inspector going to visit the plantation or the hospital every 6 months, and they must keep a register. All right. And you're also going to establish schools. So some of the colonial governors, for example, in British Ghana, going to establish schools for the Indians. And then the British government in 1869, they are going to have a commission of inquiry where they're going to investigate all the different problems that is linked to indentureship. So this is how the British government going to respond. So please note how the British government going to respond, how the immigrants themselves responded, what were the different problems, and let us look now the last thing, the effect. Once you have Chinese workers in the Caribbean, right? So we have Chinese workers, Indian workers, African workers coming to the Caribbean. The first problem, the first effect is that we must need to look at the problem. So you need to discuss the problem. Because if they ask you a question in the exam about the effects of immigration on the sugar industry, you need to first tell them what was the problem was, and based on the problem, you assess the effects. And so one of the problem was labor problem. What was the effect? Is that you're going to have increased supply of labor. Another problem, African wanted increased labor. The plantation could not increase labor, increase wages.
Sir, so all of this is 1 point?
No, this is 1 point. So you need to discuss this by itself. You need to discuss this by itself, this by itself, and this by itself. So in here is 1, 2, 3, 4 points. So one of the points is that we know that they had a labor problem. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And if they had a labor problem, once you have immigrants coming into the Caribbean, then they are going to have increased supply of labor. So the Chinese coming in and the Chinese coming in and the Indians coming in will solve the labor problem.
So, sir,
Yes.
in this point, like, would I say one of the problems that, like, the problem is labor problem, sir. Would say, why was labor a problem?
Yes, you also discussed why there was a labor problem because the Africans left the plantation.
Yes, sir. And then we're going to say, how did they get like labor from other countries like China and India?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is going to solve the labor problem. And the next problem is that the sugar industry had another problem because African wanted increased wages and they could not afford the increased wages. And so with the immigrants coming in, the immigrants are going to accept lower wages than the Africans. Right? Lower wages than the Africans. So the Africans wanted 3 shillings per day, but now the immigrants, the Chinese and the Indians are going to accept 1 shilling per day. All right, so that is going to solve the problem by reducing their wage bill. Another problem was that the Africans tried to sabotage production. So some of them walk off the plantation and all of these different stuff. Now with the immigrants coming in, production is going to increase because they you could not walk off the plantation because you signed an agreement, a contract. So you must remain on the plantation. And then the immigrants also brought with them a lot of machines. And remember that one of the reasons why the sugar plantation had a lot of different problems was that they never had a lot of machines using on the plantation. So with the Chinese and the immigrants coming to the Caribbean, you're going to have increased use of machines. So sugar production is going to increase significantly. All right. And in some territories, like Trinidad and British Guyana, new plantations with new sugar estates are going to open because a lot of Indians are coming. You have a lot of workers, they're going to open a lot of estates. All right, ladies?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Good.
sir.
All right. So when we return, so always remember when you're doing this question, look at the effects of Chinese immigration on the sugar industry. Also look at the problems the Chinese faced. What were some of what the problems the Chinese faced? Also, we're going to look at, you need to zero in why they had just a small number of Chinese compared to Indians. And the next thing you need to ensure is how the Chinese responded to their problems. Now, when we meet on Tuesday, remember, I'm not going to be here on Monday. I'll send work for you though. But on Tuesday, what
Sure.
I'm going to look at is the contribution of the immigrants to the Caribbean. So what the Indians contribute to the Caribbean, what are the contributions of the Chinese to the Caribbean? All right, ladies, enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye, sir.
All right,
Bye
thanks,
bye.
sir. Same to you.
Bye, sir.